Chapter 15. The early morning rays from Coruscant's sun were throwing long shadows down the east-west streets of Imperial City when Admiral Akbar reached the family entrance to the presidential residence. "Good morning," said the security droid. "This entrance is closed. The family is not receiving visitors at this time. Please come back another time, or call the scheduling center for further information." Akbar cocked his head and blinked in surprise. "I am Admiral Akbar." "Good morning, Admiral Akbar. This entrance is closed. Please move back to the sidewalk." "It's all right," Akbar said. "I have a key." He squeezed his eyes shut while he concentrated. "Aleph, Lamed, Zayin, Shin. Yes, I think that's it." "Good morning, Admiral Akbar," the droid said. "You may enter." The grounds were quiet, except for the tiny cow pups grazing on the lawns. When Akbar passed too close to one, it growled at him with a ferociousness all out of proportion to its size. "Go back to your breakfast," Akbar said, amused. "I'm not here for you." None of the early rays reached the well-shaded main house, and there were no lights on inside except in the kitchen, where a butler droid was completing its nightly maintenance. There was no sound from the direction of the children's rooms, which was a relief. He was not ready to deal with their eager energy. Akbar supposed that with Han's return the whole family had been up late. "Sleep in as long as you like, children," he thought with a melancholy tenderness. "Sleep in while you can." Akbar followed memory and the floorboard glow strips through the darkened halls to Leia and Han's bedroom. Out of consideration for the children, the door was closed, but not secured. He hoped his friends were not busy mating. "Open," Akbar told the housecom. "Lights." When the bedroom was suddenly flooded with light, Han reflexively spun over on his back and sat bolt upright. Squinting, he sighed away the rush of adrenaline when he recognized Akbar. "You," Han said gruffly. "It's a lucky thing for you I don't sleep with a blaster anymore." "Not luck," the calamari said. "You told me after the time you and Jaina scared each other half to death." Han's sudden movements had shaken the bed enough to bring Leia up from her deeper sleep. Now she rose on her elbows. "Admiral Akbar," she said, a quizzical expression on her face. "When I invited you to come talk me out of resigning, I thought you might at least wait until I was awake." "Good morning, Princess." "Don't try to disarm me with politeness," Leia said. "What are you doing here at this hour?" "Getting you out of bed," Akbar said. "I'll wait outside while you get dressed." "Oh, you will? Then what?" "Then there's somewhere we have to go. I have a speeder waiting." "Slow down a second. I'm not on call," said Leia. "Not for state business, especially not at this hour. What time is it, anyway?" She glanced sideways at the bedroom chrono. "Oh, heaven. I'm sorry I looked." "I understand how you feel," said Akbar. "I would rather have stayed in the water myself. Still, there's somewhere we have to go." "Why don't you tell me a little more and let me make that decision?" "I'm afraid I can't do that," said Akbar, holding out her robe. "Your head isn't clear yet. You'll have to trust me. If you do trust me." Leia frowned as she studied him. Finally, she sat up and took the robe from his hand. "Thank you, Princess." His gaze moved to Han. "General Solo, I think you should come too." "What is this, divide and conquer?" "Please, this involves you as well." "Let me find my pants," Han said resignedly. "Leia, tell me again why we gave the fish head a key to the front door." Leia peered through the viewpane of the Fleet Infirmary's Intensive Care Unit number 5 at the pale-faced young man who had just been transferred from a medical cocoon to the Bacta tank. A Fleet doctor and 2 MD-7 medical droids hovered over the biomonitors. "Who is he?" "He is Granin by stock. Paulney by allegiance," Akbar said. "His name is Plot Malar. He's suffering from severe metabolic disruption due to breathing his own wastes. He may not live. I thought you should see him now, just in case." "Why?" asked Leia. "I'm sorry for him, of course, but—" She left the sentence unfinished. "Paulney? I never heard of it," Han said. "What happened to him?" "According to the prowler that found him, he was trying to make an interstellar run in a TIE interceptor." "Why would anyone do a fool thing like that?" Han asked dismissively. "It's suicide." "Or self-sacrifice," said Akbar. "Sometimes they are hard to tell apart." "What are you talking about?" "It appears that Plot Malar was trying to get a message out of Coronach Cluster. Apparently the only way he could." Leia's eyes flashed. "What message?" "I will show you," Akbar said. "But let us stay here a while longer. I do not know why it is, but the Fleet Casualty Officer tells me that patients with family and friends to wish them health are strengthened by it. And I am afraid this young pilot needs every edge right now." In the privacy of Admiral Akbar's offices at Fleet Headquarters, in grim silence, Han and Leia watched the holo-recordings taken from Plot Malar's TIE interceptor. It was unsettling to see the familiar, forbidding shapes of warships once again at the business of dealing out destruction, and profoundly dismaying to see the cities of Paulney reduced to smoking scorch marks on the planet's barren plains. But Malar's deathly ill face gave the greatest power to his words. "Please, help us. Please, if any are still alive, try to save them. Whoever sees this, you must find these monsters and punish them. It's wrong. It's terribly wrong. I beg for justice for the dead, for my parents, for my friends, for me." When it was over, Leia pushed back from the table without a word, turning her back on Han and the Admiral. Hugging herself, she stood before the galactic holomap that covered nearly one whole wall of Akbar's office, staring up into it with haunted eyes. "Did you orchestrate all this to humiliate me, Akbar?" she said finally, still facing the map. "No, Leia," Akbar protested, surprised. "I do not understand." "That makes 2 of us," Han said, standing. "What are you talking about, Han? This doesn't have anything to do with you." She whirled around to face him. "Doesn't it? Look at him. He's just sitting there waiting for me to draw the same conclusion he has. If you wanted to convince me to resign, Admiral, you couldn't have picked any better way." "I'm missing something here," Han said, looking to Akbar for help. "Princess, you are wrong," said Akbar. "You could not be more wrong. You are the Chief of State of the New Republic. I would not have anyone else sit in that chair. We need your strength and dedication, and more now than we did yesterday, to answer this challenge." Akbar's praise deflected off Leia's defensiveness, leaving her untouched. "Whose ships were those?" she asked, pointing at the monitor. "You know as well as I." "Imperial design. Imperial fighters. What does that prove?" "Plot Malar got close enough to the first ship to interrogate it with his targeting system. It answered as the Imperial Star Destroyer Valorous." "Are you arguing with me?" "Valorous was one of the Black Sword ships on Neely Kirka's list." "I know that," she said. "And if it was at Paulney under Yavithan command, then you're looking at the biggest fool in the whole Republic. But we don't know that, do we?" "Does it matter?" "Isn't that why you brought me in here? Your subtle way of telling me I was wrong?" Akbar shook his head slowly. "I thought that before you made your decision about giving up your work, You needed to know that there's still more for us to do. Whoever sent those ships to Palnay is the enemy of the peace you've tried so hard to build. Isn't there something in the Apocrypha about wisdom beginning with knowing your limitations? Peace was a goal, not a guarantee. Besides, I was naive, which would make a fine summation of my short career, she added acerbically. Admiral Akbar's right, Han said, shaking his head. All this other stuff, who burned the toast, who borrowed whose shirt, who left the light on, none of that matters. What matters is, what are we going to do now? What can I do? Leia asked plaintively. Nothing. Palnay wasn't a member of the New Republic. They weren't even applicants. You're talking about obligations, said Han. I'm talking about the right thing to do. But that's the trick, isn't it? You can't get 3 people to agree on the right thing to do, Leia said. Peace is impossible. No matter what, it seems like there's always someone who wants to kill someone else. You can't give them enough reasons not to. At least I can't. Leia? I'm sorry about the Palnay, I truly am. But it's too late to help them. Besides, if I were to send forces anywhere near Cornox, I wouldn't have to resign. The Senate would hang me first and impeach me later. Leia shook her head. I hope Malar lives, though I'm not sure that's not being cruel if it turns out he's the only survivor. Who else knows about him? Who else has seen the recording? A very short list, Akbar said. See that it stays that way, she said, and moved toward the door. I'm going home, Han. Are you coming? Han was looking at her as though she were a stranger. I think I'll stay a while, he said. Leia shrugged. Suit yourself. As soon as the door closed behind her, Han cocked his head to one side and shot Akbar a quizzical look. I have just one question. Who was that person? And what have you done with Leia? She is hurting, said Akbar. She is questioning herself and her ideals. Tell me something I don't know, Han said. What in the world happened while I was away? I will tell you what I can, said Akbar, but I am afraid some of the answers will have to come from her. A stranger was sitting cross-legged in the street outside the family entrance, facing the house, when Leia reached it in a borrowed fleet skimmer. He was dressed in a long robe the color of saffron, which spilled out around him in a circle on the pavement. She recognized neither his profile nor his species, and slowed only so that she could hop the fence at a speed that wouldn't alarm the house defenses. But after she had disembarked and sent the speeder heading back, curiosity got the better of her. She walked out to the fence, and with the security droid hovering protectively nearby, called out to him. You? Who are you? Jobath, the Counselor of the Fire of Galantos, he said, and then his face brightened. But I know you. You are Princess Leia, the warrior queen who rallied the oppressed to rise up against the Emperor. You saved my people from slavery. Well, you're welcome. But that was a long time ago, she said, and I don't know whose version of history you've been listening to anyway. I don't remember ever being a queen or a warrior. Oh, yes, I know all the stories. You are a great woman. It is an honor to meet you. What are you doing out there? I am waiting for you, the Fian said. Your metal servant said that you were not receiving visitors, but my need is urgent. And now I see you have returned. May I rise and approach without alarming your loyal protector? What? Oh, the droid. No, he doesn't like people loitering around the entrances. What was your name again? Jobath of the Fire. Did we have an appointment, Jobath of the Fire? No, Princess. All right. I was afraid for a moment I'd forgotten, she said. Here's the way it is, Jobath of the Fire. I intend to go inside and sleep for about 3 days. If I'm still president when I get up, you can make an appointment with the scheduling center in the protocol office. She turned away from the fence and started toward the house. Princess, please wait. I've come about what's happening in the multitude. You must talk to me now." "Must I?" said Leia, looking back. "The multitude? What's that?" "The great multitude of the circle of the heavens," Jobath said earnestly. "There is another name, an ugly name." "Are you talking about Connacht?" "Yes," Jobath said brightly. "Connacht." Leia scowled. "This is too much. You tell Akbar that I'm tired of being manipulated." "Admiral Akbar?" "Right. Tell him he can have this job any time he wants it. All he has to do is say the word." "Oh, yes, Akbar. I know this name, too. He, too, was a great warrior in the rebellion. But you are mistaken. I have not had the honor of the council of the Akbar," said Jobath. "No? I have come here directly from your Eastport, and before that from Galantos, to speak with you in a matter of great urgency. A terrible evil prowls the multitude. Many have died already. My people fear for their future." As he was speaking, Leia was slowly drawn back to the fence. She curled her fingers around the wrought work and closed them into fists. "How do you know what's happened?" "There was a warning sent to us from a ship which came out of the multitude," said Jobath. "A freighter bound for Wakwa intercepted the beam of this signal, or we would not have heard the warning for a very long time, if ever. We sent our own vessel out to find this ship. It, too, found the signal, but the ship itself has vanished." Leia realized that Plot Malar, facing unconsciousness, must have used the interceptor's combat comm to transmit his recordings toward his destination. Doing so would make him, and even his ship, expendable, since no force in the galaxy could gather up or destroy his comm signal. "We have the ship," she said, resting her fired against the fence. "And the pilot." "I am glad to know this. I would like to offer him refuge on Galantos, and, if he wishes it, citizenship in the Fire." "That will have to wait, I'm afraid," said Leia. "What do you want from me?" "I've come to ask the protection of the New Republic and the great Princess Leia for my planet and my people," said Jobath, clasping the fence with long-fingered hands just below where Leia clung to it. "I beseech you to accept a petition for membership and fortify us against these murderers." Leia pulled her hands back as though fearing contact with Jobath. "I'll consider your petition," she said uncomfortably, and started to back away. "Please hurry," said Jobath. "There is little time. If they who fell on Palne choose to leave the multitude, we could be the next to suffer their predation. Our entire navy has only 2 patrol corvettes, and the cutter which brought me here. 500,000 lives are at risk on Galantos alone." "I understand that," Leia said. "Go to the diplomatic hostel. They'll provide you with quarters. I'll send word to you there." Then she turned and fled into the house, but the walls did not offer the same sanctuary they had recently promised, and sleep was no longer possible. Within an hour of Jobath's arrival at the diplomatic hostel, 3 other worlds with legations quartered there submitted emergency petitions for membership. 2 of the 3 were located in sectors far from Connacht, the third in Hatala, but still many light years from the trouble. All 3, along with the Fire, received only silence in reply. For the moment, there was silence, too, on the news grids. So far, the Palne tragedy had escaped their attention. Coruscant Global News Grid was still dissecting the fallout from the explosive Senate session earlier in the week. But in its midday refresh, Global added a new item to the feature queue. A speculative report that Princess Leia had already resigned as president. According to the rumor, treated as fact, an announcement would be made as soon as the top military leaders and the Senate agreed on a replacement. Sitting in his fleet office, Admiral Akbar viewed that news with mixed contempt and bemusement. Even if Leia had resigned, the idea that the fleet would have any part in selecting a new chief of state was absurd, The idea that any such negotiations would take place without him was equally absurd. But Akbar pondered long and hard whether he should pick up his comlink and start a rumor of his own. "We ought to get out in front this time," he said aloud to himself. "Put Plot Malar's face and story on the grids. Show everyone what happened on Palney, and bring them over to Leia's side. That's what I would do. If she could just bring herself to admit that the Viceroy never was a friend." He shook his head. It wasn't time yet. He would watch the news from Farlax, where the Fifth Fleet's prowlers were now all on station outside Coronach Cluster, sweeping hyperspace with their sensitive ripple filters. And the news from the Senate and Administrative Complex, where every analyst and commentator in Imperial City was on duty, sifting the corridor gossip with their hypersensitive news antennae. And he would wait to see which situation changed first. Absurd or not, the global report on Leia's resignation ran through the diplomatic hostel like a virulent infection. It puzzled many and worried Jobath, who began to fear he had brought his appeal to the wrong ears. That fear carried him, in the company of the Seneschal of the Marias, to the office of Chairman Ben Kilnam. Half an hour later, they left the office reassured that Leia still held executive power for the new Republic, and that their petitions were being acted on with all possible dispatch. The moment they were gone, Ben Kilnam tried one more time to reach Princess Leia, but he had no more success than with any of his many previous attempts that morning. Ben Kilnam was fast losing patience with her. Leia had closed everyone out at exactly the worst time, when they should be planning their strategy and response together. He disliked having to make tactical decisions unilaterally. Would Leia approve of his tying the withdrawals of the Walala and the others up in procedural knots as he had successfully done that morning? Or would she have preferred he simply let them go? Should he offer Paramus and Hadidiji the appointment to negotiate the return of the bodies? He thought it might give both a way to justify a change of heart. But would they conduct themselves with dignity, or simply become an embarrassment? Even more than making decisions, Ben Kilnam disliked being caught out uninformed. The business with the Palney, the pilot, and the hospital, why should he have had to hear about that from a couple of ambassadors without portfolio? How had one of them been able to meet with Leia while his calls were still going begging? Was she going to resign? If not, what was she going to do about the petitions for protection? When his usual sources were unable to satisfy his curiosity, Ben Kilnam called Hiram Drayson. The machinery of governance was frozen, paralyzed in the face of crises that would only grow worse if not attended to. Did Drayson know what had gotten stuck in its gears? "I couldn't say, Chairman," Drayson said. "You can't say, or you don't know?" "Chairman, my suggestion to you would be to put up the best pretense you can, that everything's under control. And that includes letting whoever wants to huff and puff in the well of the Senate do so to his or her heart's content." "Admiral," said Ben Kilnam gravely, "that advice worries me more than any other development of the last week." "Admiral Akbar." The man in the doorway wore casual civilian clothing, but he still had the posture of a soldier in uniform. "Mr. Drayson, come in." "I'm not here to visit this time. Can you get me in to see Leia?" "I'm afraid I cannot," said Akbar. "My key was deactivated this morning." "I have to talk to her," Drayson said simply. "Do you have any suggestions?" Akbar grunted. "I'm a little surprised to learn that the old ghost of Coruscant has no secret passages or secret passwords available to him." "Getting in isn't the problem," said Drayson. "Getting listened to is. I'm afraid that none of the means at my disposal would be likely to earn me a reasoned hearing." "There are many people who want to talk to her," said Akbar. "She does not seem to want to talk to us." "I'm afraid I can't permit her the luxury of refusing," said Drayson. She is tired of being pushed and poked at, said Akbar. If we give her some time... Jason shook his head so slightly it was almost imperceptible. There's no more time, he said. Blinking slowly, Akbar sat back in his chair. Do you know her husband? Not professionally, Jason said, but his loyalty to her is well known. Akbar nodded thoughtfully. He was here with me for 3 hours today, he said. He was the one who ordered the prowlers to Connacht, not General Abbott. Interesting. There is more. He brought the 5th Fleet back, as she ordered, but only as far as the outer marshalling point, and he kept it at combat readiness, with full crews aboard. He understands the stakes. He may be more sympathetic than you expect, but I cannot promise that she will even listen to him. Thank you, Admiral, said Drayson. That's useful. If you'll excuse me. Admiral. Yes? I was wondering, could the Viceroy have done this to Leia? All those hours he spent alone with her. We know so little about the Yavitha, said Akbar. Is it possible that something happened in that room? Is it possible that he has done something to her mind? No, said Drayson. No, I can tell you that nothing happened in that room. The answer did not seem to please Akbar. Thank you, he said all the same. The sounds of splashing and gleeful childish laughter covered any sounds of footsteps on the walk. But Leia, with her wariness magnified by powerful feelings of isolation, was aware of Admiral Drayson's approach before he had even emerged from the trees. Jaina, in turn, quickly sensed her mother's dark mood. Mommy, who's that? Do you want me to make him go away? No, Leia said with a quick smile, and tousled her daughter's wet, stringy hair. Jaina, take Anakin inside. I want you all dry and dressed when I come in. For once, the children obeyed without argument. Leia thought it was a telling sign that the stress and chaos of the last weeks, of the last few days, was affecting them as well. Drayson stopped a polite distance away, hands laced together behind his back. Princess, you know, if security is supposed to keep unwanted people out, the security around the President's residence leaves a great deal to be desired. Your husband admitted me, Princess Leia. Did he? She said. Well, my husband leaves a bit to be desired himself lately. What do you want? 5 minutes, said Drayson. He brought his right hand forward and showed her the data card he had cradled in the palm. I think this will be most useful to you in regard to the decision you're facing. Which one is that? The only one that matters. 5 minutes? And then I'll be gone. All right, she said with a sigh. 5 minutes. The data card contained a brief recording, time-stamped less than 2 hours earlier. The recording showed a pair of Yavithan thrust ships unloading on a hilly, brush-covered landscape. The kind and volume of material being unloaded, and the shape and size of the clearing being made for it, dictated one conclusion. It was the first phase of a colonization landing. Where is this? The Astrographic Office knows it as Dornick 319, Drayson said. It's part of a system inside the Connacht cluster. The Kubas, who lived there till yesterday, called it Morning's Bell. What happened yesterday? The same thing that happened to Paulney, said Drayson. And it doesn't stop there. The evidence I've seen suggests that every non-Yavithan settlement in Connacht received the same sort of treatment. What evidence? Where did you get this recording? I'd rather not you ask me that, Princess. I am asking you. Drayson nodded. Princess, is it absolutely necessary that you know the source for you to credit the evidence? If so, then I'll answer. But if you don't need that knowledge to accept what that recording means, then I'd rather not risk those assets any more than I already have by revealing what they've discovered. The information is what matters. Leia stared at him. I think my 5 minutes are up, he said with a little bow. "Thank you for seeing me." "Stop," she said sharply. "Who are you, really?" Jason turned and looked back at her. "I do what I do under the authority of an executive order issued by Mon Mothma," he said. "You'll find it in your personal library files as D9020616. Mon Mothma! She never said a word about this. She found the machinery of the New Republic unwieldy when it came to certain aspects of statecraft, getting information into the right hands, projecting policy into ambiguous situations. I try to address those shortcomings." "Who do you answer to?" "The same as you do, Princess. The same as anyone at our level does," Jason said. "I answer to my conscience and my sense of duty. And yes, if either ever fails us, we can do a great deal of harm, and probably hide most of it too. But that's all there is, isn't it? Conscience or obedience? Leader or follower? Whose orders do you obey?" He pointed at the data card. "Who will tell you what to do about that? You see? Conscience and duty." He bowed again. "Good evening, Princess." She let him go. Turning back to her data pad, Leia watched the recording a second time and then a third. The images were sharp and unambiguous. The design of the ships was distinctive and incriminating. Yavithan colonists were setting up housekeeping on a world which one day earlier had belonged to the Kubas. Leia dug her comlink out of the drawer where she had thrown it the night before, and selected a familiar channel. "Han," she said, "you can stop hiding from me now. Where are you? Please, come talk to me." "Murderers," Han muttered as he watched the recording from Dornick 319. He shook his head disbelievingly. "I've been around enough to see some cold moves pulled, but killing a family one day and moving into their house the next is right up there with anything our old buddy Palpatine ever thought of." Leia nodded. "I'm beginning to wonder if the greatest indignity that the Empire subjected the Yavitha to wasn't holding them to a higher standard of behavior," she said. "Now that's a picture, isn't it? The Emperor's stormtroopers setting the example for good manners," Han said, "like arming protocol droids with blasters." He tried to win a smile from her, but she had looked away to gaze at the map of Coronat cluster, displayed on the main screen, and he turned his attention there as well. "Look at what they've done. It makes no sense at all," he said. "It's not like any of these settlements were crowding the League worlds, or that real estate is getting scarce in there." "I'm afraid it makes perfect sense," said Leia, propping her chin on folded hands. "So much of what he said sounds different to me now, almost as though he lied to me with the truth. What we want more than anything is to be left alone. I remember that clearly, from the first time we met. He mentioned how strange it was to see so many different species. He told me the Yavitha didn't need our protection." "No," said Han. "It was the Kubas who needed protection." "He as much as told me that, too," said Leia. "He said it was his mission to protect his people, and he did. He kept them inside that ship, safely away from us. He controlled his own exposure to us, as though he were afraid of contamination. That's why those settlements were destroyed, Han. This wasn't a boundary war, or a matter of competing territorial claims. It was an act of revulsion." Han looked dubious. "Maybe so, but there's something else, too. Look at the results. Dornick 319 sits nearly on a line between Karaskat and Nazaf, just where you'd want a forward base. These other targets, it's like they burned a firebreak between themselves and all of us." She reached out and touched the point of light that was Dornick 319. "Or dug a moat, complete with gate and drawbridge, maybe." "Yeah," said Han. "So what are you going to do?" Withdrawing her finger, Leia shook her head slowly. "It seems as though it's already all over. All I can see to do now is try to make sure Nil Spar stays on his side of the moat. Protect the settlements that haven't been torched. Galatos, Wedham, the Marias. She looked up at Han. I'm going to have to send the Fifth Fleet back to Farlax. I thought that might happen, Han said. I left the fleet at Readiness High. No shore leaves, no major maintenance. They should be able to sail on a half-hour's notice. She touched his hand. I'm sorry. I know you don't want this. Hold on just a moment, Han said, pulling back from her. I'm not going anywhere. I can't change commanders on them again. Not twice in a week. Not under these circumstances. You've been out there with them for 2 months now. That gives some continuity at least. Right idea, wrong man, said Han. If it were me, the first thing I'd do is hand the Fifth back to General Abbat. How can I do that? He was disloyal to me. Was he? He disobeyed your orders. But is that the same thing as being disloyal? Did he do what he did for personal gain? Did he do it to enhance his career or aid the enemy? No, he was trying to protect all those people out there with him, and all the people back here, too. And hell, Leia, he was right. He ought to get some points for that. You said it yourself, she said stiffly. He disobeyed my orders. He disobeyed an order you never should have given, Han said. And if that's your reason, you're going to have to disqualify me, too. That prowler that picked up Plot Malar, what do you think it was doing out there? She realized she had never asked herself that question. I guess I assumed it was Admiral Drayson's handiwork. You weren't paying close enough attention, Han said. That's a Fifth Fleet prowler. I sent it there. You? Leia said, and her eyes flashed anger. I don't understand. Is it because I'm a woman? Is that why lately everyone seems to treat my orders like suggestions? Aw, blast no, Leia. I keep telling you the uniform doesn't fit me very well, he said. I'm just as bad at following orders from men. I always have been. You know that. Look, I was there. You weren't. I did it on a hunch. How do you explain General Abbat? Why don't you ask him? Han parried. But remember this. Before he came to Coruscant, General Abbat was the senior military commander of the Dornier. He was accustomed to a greater degree of autonomy than we grant our fleet commanders. He answered to his own conscience. I happen to think he was tremendously loyal to you, not least in the way he accepted his demotion. You could do a lot worse than ask him to come back. How can I? I humiliated him in front of his crew, his command. If you think what you did changed how they felt about him, you've forgotten the rules of the game, Han said. What you did changed how they felt about you. Give them back their commander. They won't have anything worse to say about you than they're already saying. You might even win back a couple of points. What should I say? You don't have to say anything, not to them. Send the Fifth Fleet back to Farlax under General Abbat's command, and they'll get the message, Han said. Leia, only weak leaders never admit to mistakes. Strong leaders don't need to pretend to be infallible. Just fix this. There are bigger problems to chew on. She glanced up at the map of Cornhocht, then studied the backs of her hands. I have Bail Organa's stubborn pride, she said quietly. It's hard for me to admit when someone else was more right than I was. If you weren't headstrong, you wouldn't be my Leia, Han said with a crooked, affectionate grin. You're staying on then? No resignation. I can't leave this mess for someone else, Leia said. I'm going to have to take the responsibility for it. Nil Spar wouldn't have done this if he hadn't been sure that we would let him. That I would let him. You're not responsible for his miscalculation. What do you mean? We're not going to let him. Oh, Leia said. Do you know where General Abbat is? He came back with me in the skiff. He's probably over in the fleet dormitories expecting to beat court-martial. The fleet office will know. I'd better go see him, she said, gathering her feet under her. I'll call on the way over. You're doing the right thing, Han said. I'll hang out with the kids till you get back. Thanks. She kissed him quickly and started to leave, then stopped and turned back. Han. What? How could I have been so wrong about Nil Spar? How could I have sat there for so long, being lied to with smiles, and never have known? I'm a Jedi. I'm supposed to be more perceptive than that. You don't lean on that talent very hard, he said. From what I can see, you don't really want to. I guess there's some truth in that, she admitted. Still, I can't stop thinking I should have known what he was. I think maybe you saw what you wanted to see, Han said gently. You still believe in the basic goodness and rationality of the people you meet. Not everyone has that handicap. Though he likely could have had for the asking one of the suites held for senior officers and guests, General Abbott was billeted in a double in one of the enlisted dormitories. And though he had more than enough right to have it closed, the door to his room was standing open, respecting a tradition that redrew the boundaries of privacy from the first day of training. Abbott himself was prone on the floor, turned half away from the door, going through a strenuous series of body lifts without so much as a grunt. General, Leia said, may I come in? The Dornian officer came to his feet smoothly and saluted smartly. Princess, he said, I am surprised to see you. Leia closed the door behind her. I think we need to talk. I received your apology and offered to resign on the way over here. Princess, I hope you understand that I am not bargaining to escape the consequences of my actions, Abbott said. I'm willing to stand for court-martial, or resign, or accept demotion to whatever grade you deem fit, whatever you think would be best for the fleet and the Republic. I do not want to be the cause of any further embarrassment for you, or the fleet, or Chandrila. Leia pulled a straight-backed chair out from under the small desk and sat down. You know, General, I've been thinking a lot about resigning myself. I've made several mistakes lately that I've had trouble accepting. A little while ago, after talking things over with my best friend in the world, I decided that the hardest thing for me to do would be to stay where I am. And so that was what I was going to do. And it's going to be hard enough that I think I'd better have your help. Your offer to resign is rejected. I understand, Princess. If I may, has a date been selected for my trial? Trial? She shook her head. You don't have time for a trial, General. You and I both still have work to do. Sir? She sighed. General, I was wrong. I can't put it any more plainly. Will you accept my apology and return to the Intrepid as commander of the Fifth Fleet? Surprise sat uncomfortably on the Dornian's features. Princess, can I possibly have your confidence after what's happened? What happened shouldn't have happened, but the blame is mine, not yours, Leia said. Your conduct and your judgment were both faultless. You will have my confidence for as long as your service to the New Republic remains on such a high plane. Abbott was visibly embarrassed. Then, Princess, I thank you for your apology, which you did not owe me, and I am at your disposal to serve in whatever capacity you feel I can be useful. Good, she said, standing and gesturing at their surroundings, because you really don't belong here. Can I give you a ride to Eastport, General? The loyalty of small men can be bought cheaply, because greed has no pride. Within minutes of General Eitan Abbott's return to the Fifth Fleet, the Armada jumped into hyperspace, heading for Farlax and Cornacht Cluster. Within minutes of that event, Belezabath Auern, extraordinary consul of the Pakwapori, had reported it to Viceroy Nil Spar by hyperspace comm. I don't know what orders the General has been given, of course, Auern said, but the Princess herself was seen delivering him to his shuttle, and the entire fleet is gone, as quickly as it returned, and with as little explanation. Thank you, Consul, Nil Spar said gravely. Your assistance will not be forgotten by the Yavitha. I urge you to be on guard for more lies from the princess and those who serve her." "Oh, we will watch her. We will watch her," said Howard. "Viceroy, a small question." "Of course." "When can we expect delivery of the thrust ship you promised, in payment for the damage to Mother's Valkyrie, which we agreed to allow? Should I decide to leave Coruscant, my only options are to charter a vessel at considerable expense, or take a commercial flight at considerable inconvenience." Ilspar smiled ingratiatingly. "Soon, Consul. Soon. The newest vessel from our best shipyard is being altered to your specifications as we speak. Have patience. You will not be disappointed." In an empty room of a deserted lodge on the grounds of the diplomatic hostel in Imperial City, a hypercom repeater answered a coded call from light years away. The repeater in turn activated a delicate and elegant transmitter, which bounced a curious signal into the heart of a bland-faced building filled with the machinery of the New Republic government's official information net. Moments later, Second Shift Supervisor Tarat Ilfin sat in open-mouthed amazement at his master controller station as the Channel 1 homeworld notification system awakened of its own accord. Only 3 offices could originate the rare Channel 1 dispatches: the ruling council, the President, and the Fleet High Command. But the background blue screen that appeared on Channel 1 carried none of their identifying insignia. All that appeared were the words, "Transmission begins in," followed by a counter. Even so, Channel 1 went active. The tickle went out, alerting the net that a priority message was imminent. Almost immediately, hypercom receivers on every homeworld and in every administrative center began to respond, signaling their readiness. "We're being hacked," Tarat raged at his technicians. "Find out where the signal is getting in. If we can't lock it out, I want to take the system down." But there was little they could do. "Not enough time," a technician muttered. "C1s are supposed to get out no matter what. That's the way we built the system." At Tarat's station, the acknowledgement counter had climbed to 95%. "Do something," he pleaded. "If we let a pirate broadcast get out on C1, we'll all be lucky to get jobs as grid installers." But they had run out of time. The counter reached 0000 and stopped. The blue background began to fade. Tarat looked at the acknowledgement counter and thought about the audience it represented. Not only the countless thousands of receivers and recorders, but the officials charged with attending them. Cabinet ministers and diplomatic liaisons, senior advisors and planetary rulers, roused from sleep, called away from other duties, torn away from their private business to gather in front of monitors on every planet from Bespin to Bis. Tarat Ilfin could not sit quietly with that audience and watch his career ending. As the broadcast began, he stood up from his station, turned away, and walked out. "Citizens of the New Republic." The door slid closed behind him. He heard no more. In that, he was one of the few. At the moment the broadcast began, a late meeting was underway in the office wing of the President's residence. Ben Kilnam, Admiral Akbar, Admiral Drayson, Leia, and Han were painstakingly crafting an announcement about the Yavithan massacres and a strategy to guide them after its release in the morning. They had just broken a deadlock over how to handle Plot Malar's involvement. Leia was determined not to exploit him and carried the argument. When all 4 data pads on the table began to chirp warning signals, "Channel 1, Leia said, silencing her alarm. "Did any of you—" "No," said Akbar. "Absolutely not," said Ben Kilnam. "Then who?" asked Drayson. I've got a bad feeling about this, Han said darkly. The holomonitor on the end wall came on by itself for a Channel 1 dispatch. "Citizens of the New Republic," said the image of Nil Spar, "I beg your indulgence for this intrusion, and I apologize for the unhappy news I must bring you." Ben Kilnam flushed in an angry red. If any member of the Senate has had any part in this— "Quiet," Jason said sharply. "I am the Viceroy of the Duskan League, a free federation of Yavitha worlds in what you call the Kornacht Cluster," said Nilspar. "I have come to you a second time to tell you of events far from your homeworlds and warn you of a danger very close at hand. 2 days ago, the forces of the Yavithan Protectorate successfully thwarted a deadly plot against our people and our way of life. The plot involved inhabitants of 3 planets. 3, said Ben Kilnam. They can't count or tell the truth. Located near the boundaries of our territory. These outsiders, whom we had generously allowed to settle on Yavithan soil, betrayed our trust and hospitality. All were discovered to be secretly assisting our enemies prepare for an invasion. We have escaped the immediate danger. We acted swiftly and forcefully in our defense, and we make no apology for doing so. All those responsible have been executed for their crimes. Great stars, said Akbar. He's claiming credit for the massacres. But you, the homeworlds, remain in danger, because the plot against us was hatched on Coruscant by a new generation of warlords. They are our enemies, not because we wish it, but because they have chosen it. They are your enemies as well. They hide their faces and their evils behind a cloak of open government. Do not underestimate their perfidy. A new empire is being born, led by a child of the old empire. Your dream has been betrayed. You have placed your trust in immoral and deceitful leaders. I accuse President Princess Leia Organa Solo of high crimes against her office and against my people. Even now, after her conspiracy has been revealed, she threatens us. Warships of the new empire are in Farlax at this very moment, seeking to compel my silence and our submission. She covets our wealth and fears our independence. But know this. The Yavitha will never bow our necks to this woman and her hired killers. We will resist her predations to the fullest measure. Her spies and conspirators know that now. Her generals will know it soon. We will resist, and we will prevail. We regret the deaths which have already transpired, but they are on her hands, and the hands of those who serve her without question. We have the right to protect ourselves. We will never accept the authority of the Coruscant warlords over our dominion, and we will not tolerate the daughter of Vader meddling in our affairs. If you do not renounce her, and you will not restrain her, then be prepared for war.
This unabridged audiobook was developed 100% using artificial intelligence to generate realistic and familiar voices.